We met in July of 2020. From that point to October 13th, 2020, which was our first official board meeting, you and I were essentially meeting daily.
Okay.
Zoom. And I think most of the time I was in Munich at the time.
Yeah, this is the middle of the pandemic.
This middle of the pandemic.
Yeah.
We're Zooming it. I would say even in our first meeting, the first 30 minutes, you blew me away because you talked in Spanish and you talked perfectly with accent. And I remember looking back at that call and just being like, God, this guy's the real deal.
That call was a lot of fun for me because I said to myself in advance that I was going to start it in Spanish and surprise you, and you were surprised.
I was surprised.
Yeah.
I was, but it sealed the deal for me. I didn't know what you were cooking, but I wanted to be a part of it.
My wife and I have funded scholarships for kids, Latinos, Latinas, blacks, for decades, and we were providing financial support. But what occurred to me in the middle of 2020, after the murder of George Floyd, was that there was another component. There's the human component, and financial help is fine, but without somebody to talk to mentor you, to guide you, the money kind of falls into an empty pocket, if you will, right? And it takes that human connection to really build people who can prosper in something as complex, as abstract, as unknown for most kids as STEM disciplines.
Especially in this kind of work, when you're looking to connect to students and communities that have been at the periphery for far too long, you got to start with that. And on that call, I felt that, right? I felt you talking to me in Spanish, like my uncle would, like my father would, like a relative would, was like we were already starting to cook like that.
It occurred to me immediately when we got into talking and sharing experiences that you could provide the human element that I had never thought about when trying to build diversity in the companies that we build. And we're really talking about two forces, one financial and one human, that may be orthogonal, right, squared, but mutually supportive. And we like to say it's 30% financial, 70% human.
Yeah.
And I think the efforts that you and Carmen and others have put together really emphasize that. Gosh, my mentor looks like me, and they've done it before, is such an important part of solving the problem. And also, not funding a scholarship based on a cold, hard piece of paper that comes requesting financial support, but really developing a human relationship with the student over maybe years. What we need to build diversity in STEM companies is a generational solution. So you tap in to the student when they're in middle school or high school, you follow them through college, you follow them through the next step, whatever it might be, and encourage them at some point when they're STEM employed to loop back into their community. And therein lies the complete generational solution.
There's so many students out there that just don't have those networks, those communities around them. And I think that's where, for us, just not going against the current, but trying to really take a step back, understand, like, how does someone go from middle school or high school to a successful executive or board of director? And then can we synthesize that in an organization in a way that takes that student to the top in that same way? Really, a large part of this work is building culture. Is maintaining that humanity.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm sure you probably find that in your companies as well, right?
Every company, and certainly applies to every STEM company, really needs to have a set of corporate values that really lay out the values in a way that allow employees to understand what behaviors are encouraged, and then if you think about it, what behavior should be avoided. And I think you've built remarkable culture within San Diego Squared with those values that we laid out at the very, very beginning. And I think that's an important thing for our students to understand. Probably the best piece of advice we can give any of them is in terms of the science, the engineering, the mathematics. You need to pick a field within that broad STEM area that you know for sure you can become really passionate about. When we sit down with a student who all of a sudden has an aspiration to do something in STEM because he or she has seen it in others our mentors or perhaps ourselves, it touches me in a way that cold hard STEM doesn't, right? Because of the human element. Watching students get that aspiration, say to themselves, yes, there is a route, si se puede, is very important to me. The si se puede that borrowed from Obama, of course, but very, very relevant to a student who all of a sudden says, whoa, I think I know how to put the pieces together now. And it involves learning how to write a resume and how to apply to college and to work with my mentor productively, right?
Yeah.
It's the human element that gives us San Diego squared.
Well, and I think to that point, you know, it's like talent is universal, but opportunity oftentimes isn't. When do you think we've been successful?
Well, I think we are successful, but success must be enduring. And I think a really exciting thing that's beginning to happen now is that our scholars who were freshmen, now 4 years later, are graduating. And so the question is, what do they do with all this newfound knowledge and power from a STEM education? They're going to go get employed immediately? Are they going to go to graduate school? Are they going to go to medical school? And how long is it going to take for them to go back to their communities and each one of them recruit 4 or 5 kids and get that generational wheel moving and moving and moving? So I think very exciting time for us.
You know, I think we're already starting to see some of that where you have, some of even our college students are coming back to talk to the high school students and share their journeys. And when we get the feedback from the high school students as to their experiences, they're always pointing to those sort of near peer experiences. When you hear someone that comes from your neighborhood or studied at the same school that you went to and is now involved in STEM and is now coming back to share those stories, it just inspires in a completely different way than you and I could ever inspire anyone to do. If we look at communities that have long been underrepresented, particularly in STEM, I think we've already proven that there's so many students out there that have that skill set that don't realize that where they come from and their families and the dancing of the salsa and the community and the relationships, that's actually their secret weapon. To have a student think they need to change who they are to become a professional, to become an executive of a biotech or a tech company, I think we would have failed.
Yeah.
And I think, we want students to know that they are amazing. They are excellent. They bring unbelievable superpowers to the table that we just haven't seen. And they shouldn't have to lose that along their journey to become a CEO.
Well, the word that you used before, which I think is tremendously relevant and important to career development, is confianza. Confianza comes at least in 2 shades. One is confidence with technical materials. The other is confidence with people. Right? And if we can develop STEM leaders because they are not only confident in their discipline, but confident in working with people, then we're talking about the leaders of the future.